Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Jamuna Giravanachari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Stotra Sadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Anantagoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Samveta Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaura Premanande. We'll chant Mangalacharan prayers before commencing the shloka. Please chant together with me. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svāyambhuva Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This morning we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 21, Conversation between Manu and Kardama. And there are two verses to cover, 48, which is on the board, and 49. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Athoṭajam upāyātaṁ. Athoṭajam upāyātaṁ. athoṭajam upāyātaṁ nṛdevaṁ praṇatam puraḥ nṛdevaṁ praṇatam puraḥ nṛdevaṁ praṇatam puraḥ saparyayā paryagṛhṇāt saparyayā paryagṛhṇāt saparyayā paryagṛhṇāt pratinandya anurūpayā pratinandyaanurūpayā pratinandyaanurūpayā athoṭajam upāyātaṁ nṛdevaṁ praṇatam puraḥ saparyayā paryagṛhṇāt 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 pratinandyaanurūpayā athoṭajam upāyātaṁ nṛdevaṁ praṇatam puraḥ paryagṛhṇāt pratinandyaanurūpayā. athoṭajam upāyātaṁ nṛdevaṁ praṇatam puraḥ saparyayā paryagṛhṇāt pratinandyaanurūpayā. Someone else? athoṭajam upāyātaṁ nṛdevaṁ praṇatam puraḥ saparyayā paryagṛhṇāt pratinandyaanurūpayā. Atha, then, uṭajam, the hermitage, upāyātaṁ, approached, nṛdevaṁ, the monarch, praṇatam, bowed down, puraḥ, in front, saparyayā, with honor, paryagṛhṇāt, received him, pratinandya, greeting him, anurūpayā, befitting the king's position. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Translation: seeing that the monarch had come to his hermitage and was bowing before him, the sage greeted him with benediction and received him with due honor. Please repeat. Seeing that the monarch had come to his hermitage and was bowing before him, the sage greeted him with benediction, and received him with due honor. Due honor. Purport. Emperor Svāyambhuva Manu not only approached the cottage of dried leaves possessed by the hermit Kardama, but also offered respectful obeisances unto him. Similarly, it was the duty of the hermit to offer blessings to kings who used to approach his hermitage in the jungle. End of purport. And text 49 we can read. gṛhītārhaṇam āsīnaṁ samyatam prīnayan munihi smaran bhagavadādesham ityaha slakshnaya gira. Translation. After receiving the sage's attention, the king sat down and was silent. Recalling the instructions of the Lord, Kardama then spoke to the king as follows, delighting him with his sweet accents. I'll just read the translations again. Seeing that the monarch had come to his hermitage and was bowing before him, the sage greeted him with benediction and received him with due honor. After receiving the sage's attention, the king sat down and was silent. Recalling the instructions of the Lord, Kardama then spoke to the king as follows, delighting him with his sweet accents. Canto 3, Chapter 21, 48-49, Conversation between Manu and Kardama. We are continuing on in the very interesting narration given here, how Kardama Muni did his austerities and now he's going to receive the fruit of that. So we welcome all the devotees to have taken the time to attend Srimad Bhagavatam class today. Yesterday, the Prabhu who gave class, Mohan Prabhu, he was asking devotees, what is your motivation in coming to Bhagavatam class and attending the class? And several devotees gave their answers. And I was thinking, at least personally, my motivation is primarily because this is what Srila Prabhupada had desired for the devotees to do. Srila Prabhupada's instructions that we should daily hear Srimad Bhagavatam, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, we should read his books, we should come together in the temple, associate with devotees, chant Hare Krishna together, worship the deity, associate, take prasadam. The process that Srila Prabhupada gave us, he stressed so many times to his disciples through his lectures, through his letters, through his personal dealings, that if we stick to the path of bhakti as he has delineated for us, then we are very safely under the shelter of the Lord. And hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is one of the 5 main processes as given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, main processes of devotional service. So now we're in the season in Mayapur. We have a lot more visiting devotees and devotees who will come for studies, Mayapur Institute, Mayapur Academy. And previously, last time I had given class was August, and literally there were like 10 or 15 devotees here only. So it's really nice to see the enthusiasm of so many Vaishnavas coming together to hear Bhagavatam every day. Of course, if I asked some of the devotees who are obliged to come, there have people taking attendance. If you're a student of Mayapur Institute, if you're a student of Mayapur Academy, you lose marks if you don't have good sadhana. So that is also one motivation. And you may have noticed that on the weekends, the number is a little less. That's because the weekend sadhana is optional. It's not marked. So some devotees take advantage and take a little break. But those devotees who come 7 days a week, especially like to congratulate you, and you're the inspiration for the devotees who are sitting on this asana and speaking Bhagavatam to try to convey something of the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, to inspire all the attendees in their devotional practices. So thank you. So when I was reviewing this chapter, I was thinking that the Lord has played so many roles. He's all-powerful, full of 6 opulences, and very loving to his devotees. We heard in the previous verses how he was actually shedding tears of joy to see Kardama Muni, to speak to Kardama Muni, and those tears fell into this Bindu Sarovar lake, which was described in the previous verses. And I was trying to think if there's any other instance where the Lord is enacting this kind of intimate dealing with his devotee, where he's actually become the matchmaker for Kardama Muni. Matchmaking is a big industry. And here the Lord himself is the matchmaker for Kardama Muni. Not just the matchmaker, but he's even predicting the future children of Kardama Muni. It's almost like giving him a blessing. You're going to have 9 daughters who are going to marry the sages, and they're going to populate the universe. Because we have to remember, this is the beginning of the universal creation, where the universe is still to be populated. There are not many living entities actually manifest. So this is why Kardama Muni was instructed by Lord Brahma, please expand the living entities, propagate living entities, have many children, so the universe can fill up and the cycle can start up properly. Give the living entities a chance to get out of the material engagement and go back to Godhead. That's ultimately the purpose. So this is why Kardama Muni was performing his austerities for 10,000 years, preparing himself to go into the Grihastha ashram. And his Grihastha ashram was so blessed that the Lord personally became his matchmaker. And now we are seeing the fruit of that. He predicted that in 2 days, the day after tomorrow, when the Lord was speaking to Kardama, he said, day after tomorrow, the king of the world, Svāyambhuva Manu, he will personally come here with his daughter, and she is the perfect match for you, and this is my blessing unto you. The Lord has told Kardama Muni a few verses ago. And now we see it unfolded before us, where Svāyambhuva Manu, who is the original king, he's personally come to the ashram of Kardama Muni. He's bowed before him, showing the proper etiquette, and then going to start their conversation. And in the next chapter, we'll see the marriage of Kardama and Devavati. So Svāyambhuva Manu he's not just a random king. In modern days, there are so many kings. Each king has a little province, and they fight with each other, minor kings. But he's the emperor of the whole world, the original king. And he's also one of the Mahajans, as was mentioned previously, one of the speakers. Svāyambhu Narada Shambhu Kumara Kapilo Manu. So Manu is one of the Mahajans, and he's a Kshatriya, and he's a Grihastha. So he's actually senior in so many ways to Kardama Muni. By age, he's senior. By opulence, he's senior. He's a Mahajan. So he's no less spiritually qualified than Kardama Muni. And Kardama Muni is he's a poor Brahmana, you could say, and living in the forest. We saw in the previous verse that he doesn't have very luxurious clothes. He said he was clad in rags and matted locks of hair on his head, performing austerities. And much younger also to Kardama Muni, because he's going to marry his daughter. So in so many ways, we might think that Svāyambhuva Manu, he's a senior person in this relationship. He's also going to be the father-in-law of Kardama Muni. In so many ways, he could be considered senior. But we know, according to the etiquette actually is given to us by Manu himself. Svāyambhuva Manu is the author of the Manu Samhita, which gives the codes of conduct, how to live in human society under the principles of varnashram. So he's showing the example of very humbly approaching this seemingly younger junior person and offering his respectful obeisances. And he just said, he didn't speak anything, he just sat there after being greeted by Kardama Muni. And Kardama Muni also, he played his role as the Brahmana. He's senior, Rishi. So he's giving benediction and blessings and honoring the king appropriately. And then Kardama Muni is going to speak from tomorrow, in tomorrow's verse. And he remembered the instructions of the Lord, and he's preparing to speak in a very beautiful voice. Slakshnaya gira means a very sweet voice. So this is, although the verses don't cover too much detail, the purport is very short, but we can get some lessons from here, how to approach Vaishnavas, senior Vaishnavas, how to interact. And of course, Bhagavatam is full of such narrations of the meeting between various devotees and various great sages and kings, and how they interacted with each other, sometimes in a very positive way, sometimes in a negative way, which caused some bad reactions. So I thought we could just go through quickly some of the major interactions that we see, meetings between great personalities, as given in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. So in the first canto, when Maharaj Parikshit has been cursed already by Shringi, and he's renounced his kingdom, and he's sat down preparing to die, to fast to death, and all the great sages of the universe had appeared there. So Maharaj Parikshit, he, as we know from the last chapter of first canto, he approached the sages and asked them, what was his duty now that he has only 7 days to live? What is the duty of all men, especially one who is about to die? And as he approached these sages and submitted this question, that moment, who appeared? Shukadeva Goswami. And again, Shukadeva Goswami was only 16 years old. He was far junior to all the sages assembled there. If you read the list of sages, there's Narada, there's Vyasadeva, Parashuram, like pretty much any sage you've ever heard of had come there to be with the king, to support him in his final days. And in the Purport, Prabhupada says that there were so many rishis there, and it seemed that they didn't have a conclusion. What should Parikshit Maharaj actually do? What should he listen to? What should he hear about? How should he spend his last days? But when Shukadeva Goswami appeared, he didn't even speak anything. Just by seeing him, all the sages stood up in respect, and they offered him the Vyasasan. And Parikshit Maharaj also came forward and worshipped him and submitted his questions again, and then we know that's how the Srimad Bhagavatam unfolds. So this is an example of a very positive outcome between the meeting of two great devotees. Then we can fast forward to earlier in this canto, when the four Kumaras came to Vaikuntha. Just recently, a few months back, we were discussing those verses also. So the four Kumaras are also Brahmanas, and Brahmanas are generally allowed unrestricted access. No one stops the Brahmana from entering any place. So they entered Vaikuntha, and they went through several gates, 7 gates. At the 8th gate, we know how they were stopped by Jai and Vijay, and there was a very tense kind of standoff between Jai and Vijay and the four Kumaras, which ended up with the four Kumaras cursing them, and Lord Narayan coming out and apologizing on behalf of his servants. Of course, we know this is ultimately the desire of the Lord, but externally it would seem, at least for Jai and Vijay, that it was, they committed an offense, they committed a mistake, and therefore they had to take birth as demons for 3 births. So we have to be very careful in dealing with great personalities. If we offend them, we know that a Vaishnava aparat can uproot our bhakti creeper and cause great destruction in our spiritual life. Similarly, later on in the same 3rd canto, we have when King Vena was on the throne. He's a very cruel and very powerful king, and he was so disruptive that his father, who was King Anga, he couldn't train his son properly. And eventually Anga became so frustrated, he simply left and renounced the kingdom. And in the morning, everyone woke up and there was no king. And as an emergency situation, the Brahmanas felt obliged to install Vena as the king, even though Vena was not actually a qualified candidate. But because there was nobody else, and because the rogues and thieves would plunder the citizens without a strong ruler, they reluctantly installed Vena as the king. And unfortunately, Vena, he didn't change when he became king. He actually became more oppressive. And he actually instructed all the Brahmanas and sages that you have to stop yajna, don't worship Lord Vishnu. I am the king, nṛdevaṁ. This word is also used here. nṛdevaṁ means the king, who is like a representative of the demigods. So you don't need to worship the demigods. You don't need to worship Lord Vishnu. Worship me, and everything will be fine. And so this is what was going on. It's almost like Hiranyakashipu, who also stopped all the worship of the Lord. So the sages came together and said, we have to correct the situation, because this whole society is going to go to hell if this continues, if we're not allowed to worship the Lord, and the varnashram system is going to be destroyed. So they very humbly and sweetly approached King Vena and instructed him that what you're doing, Your Majesty, is not correct. You have to allow the Brahmanas, in fact, it's the duty of the king is to see that the citizens are engaged in worship of the Lord properly. But he just dismissed them very rudely and said, no, you don't need to worship. You people don't know what you're talking about. You just worship me, that's enough. So the sages, they had enough, and they showed their Brahminical power, their tejas. Simply by uttering mantra, they were able to kill King Vena on the spot to rectify the situation. So this also was not a positive outcome for King Vena. He was killed on the spot because of his disrespect to the Brahmanas. Also, similarly, in the third canto, we have when Daksha and Lord Shiva met. Daksha was very proud. He was a Prajapati. He also had the duty of propagating the universe, of populating the universe. And when he came into the assembly of demigods, all the other demigods stood to offer respects to him, except Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. And Daksha was also the father-in-law of Lord Shiva, so he felt himself superior. And he didn't like Lord Shiva. He had some grudge against Lord Shiva. And he started blaspheming Lord Shiva in front of the entire assembly of demigods. Very harsh words he spoke, which are all documented in Bhagavatam. And therefore, Nandi, who was the servant of Lord Shiva, he counter-cursed Daksha, and it's called a Daksha Yagya, means like the cursing and counter-cursing, a very horrible scene where everyone just became very offensive and lost their composure, lost their tolerance, except Lord Shiva. He was very calm and peaceful. He felt sad that this was going on, but he didn't get involved, and he simply left very quietly. So he also showed the example of how a devotee should deal in such a situation. If there's some conflict or fight between Vaishnavas, it's better to not get involved. It's a safer position. So like that, we see also when Lord Vamanadev approached Bali Maharaj, Vamanadev's purpose was to cheat Bali Maharaj. And Bali Maharaj was doing a sacrifice. And it says when Vamanadev was approaching, he was so brilliant that it was like dazzling effulgence. He was blinding the eyes of all the participants and all the other sages who were also very qualified and very effulgent. But in front of Vamanadev, all their effulgence was like diminished. And immediately Bali Maharaj received Vamanadev. He washed his feet, put the feet on his water, the Charanamrita on his head, and he offered. And he said, whatever you need, please take from me. And Vamanadev wasn't someone famous. He just appeared right then, actually, especially for this pastime. He wasn't like a known sage. But just seeing his features and seeing his effulgence, and because he was a Brahmana, Bali Maharaj, who was supposedly a demon, but actually was a great devotee, he surrendered to him, and we know how things unfolded. Apparently, it might seem that Bali Maharaj lost everything, but actually he gained the personal association of the Lord. And he's still today the embodiment of Atma Nivedanam, one who has fully surrendered everything to the Lord. Then we can fast forward to the 9th canto, when Durvasa Muni approached Maharaj Ambarish. So sometimes you see the Brahmanas are approaching the Kshatriyas, sometimes the Kshatriyas are approaching the Brahmanas, sometimes it's very positive, sometimes it becomes a mess. So Durvasa Muni is known as a very hot-tempered sage, and he came to Maharaj Ambarish's assembly just when Maharaj Ambarish was about to break his fast. It's a Kadashi fast for some devotees is quite austere, but it says that Maharaj Ambarish was doing that for a whole year. You can imagine, it's like the day after Nirjala Kadashi, there's such a buzz in the air to break fast. But he was doing it for a whole year, and there was only a short muhurta when he had to break the fast. So when the Rasa Muni came, then as a guest, Maharaj Ambarish welcomed him very nicely and said, please accept prasadam. And Durvasa Muni said, yes, I will, but I have to first go bathe and do Gayatri and things. I'll be back soon. So he didn't come back soon, and the time was slipping away, and all the Brahmin advisors of Maharaj Ambarish were saying, you really have to break the fast, because otherwise the entire vrata will be useless. And the Durvasa Muni actually on purpose wasn't coming back, just to provoke the king. So Maharaj Ambarish, being very intelligent, said, well, I can't eat before my guest, that would be an offense, but I can drink a little water. That's considered eating but not eating. And there's actually a verse that says drinking water could be considered breaking the fast or not breaking the fast. So he very intelligently came up with his own solution, and the Brahmanas all agreed this is what you should do. So then he took a little water, but the Durvasa Muni came back and flew into a rage, feeling insulted, and wanted to kill Maharaj Ambarish on the spot. You can see the difference between the offense of King Vena and the offense of Maharaj Ambarish. King Vena actually had stopped the worship of the Lord, and he wasn't listening to the good advice of the Brahmanas, therefore he was deposed. But Maharaj Ambarish's offense was wasn't even an offense, but Durvasa Muni took offense, and he was using that excuse as a justification for killing Maharishi Ambarish. So a major overreaction. And of course we know how the Lord protected Maharishi Ambarish, and Durvasa Muni ultimately had to surrender to him. And he realized that Maharishi Ambarish is actually much more powerful because he's under the shelter of the Lord. Then we can go to the 10th canto, where when Lord Balaram is during the holy places, he comes to Naimisharanya, the same Naimisharanya where Sutta Goswami is relating Srimad Bhagavatam to the sages. And there's a great assembly of sages, and Ramaharshana Sutta is the speaker. So you can kind of picture the scene. It's like, you can pretend I'm Ramaharshana Sutta, and you're all the sages listening to me speak. And in walks, let's say Srila Prabhupada. Lord Balaram, we can't really imagine, but we could say, imagine Srila Prabhupada were to walk in. And then, what would be your reaction? Everyone would, pay obeisances, stand up, offer pranams, give him a seat. And that would be my duty also. But when Lord Balaram walked into the assembly, although all the other sages did that, they showed honor, they understood that here's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Never mind he's a kshatriya in his, material manifestation. He's posing himself as a king, and the brahmanas and sages are above the kings. But because it's Lord Balaram, he's the Supreme Lord. Therefore, we naturally have to offer respect. So everyone followed the proper etiquette, understanding Lord Balaram to be the Supreme Lord, except the speaker, who was supposed to be the most advanced, most refined, chaste follower of the Vedic etiquette. So Lord Balaram saw this and said, this Ramaharshan, he's disrespecting me. He's supposed to be speaking on spiritual subjects to purify the audience, but he doesn't even recognize the Supreme Lord. So what is he going to teach to all these sages? And Lord Balaram considered, my duty is paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha duskritam. Here's a dushkriti. He's a bogus speaker of the Bhagavatam, bogus speaker of the Shastra. So he immediately killed him on the spot, even though the sages protested and there was some prayaśchitta that Balaram had to undertake voluntarily to please the sages. So like that, the principle I'm trying to convey is that interaction between these great personalities, or even in our own lives, how we deal with other Vaishnavas, has to be done according to the etiquette and with great respect and humility, lest we risk offending superior personality, which can be very dangerous for our spiritual lives. So it kind of goes back to the principle of atiti seva, which is the welcoming and worship of a guest, which is actually a very important principle in Vedic culture. Guest is considered as good as God. Atiti devo bhava literally means guest is God. This is actually used, this phrase is used in some of the Indian tourism, promotions. Atiti devo bhava, that we welcome guests and we treat them like God. So it's actually a line from the Taittiriya Upanishad. And it's not just atiti devo bhava. There are 4 categories mentioned. Matri devo bhava, pitri devo bhava, atiti devo bhava, acharya devo bhava. So there are 4. Matri, the mother; pitri, the father; the guest; and acharya, the guru. They should all be treated as good as God. So mother, father, guru, we can probably relate to easier. But the guest is also considered a representative of God, especially the uninvited guest. This is something very foreign to Western. If you have grown up in the West, an uninvited guest, it's not really a concept of an uninvited guest. In fact, Prabhupada would comment that rather than welcoming guests, people put up signs on their house, beware of dog, and alarm systems. And especially in America, if you knock on the wrong door, you can just be shot. It happens almost daily. People go to the wrong door, or they drive, and they're driving the car and they reverse into someone's driveway to turn around, and they can just be shot. This is how people are so paranoid. It happens on a regular basis, and Prabhupada noticed this. Whereas in Vedic culture, a guest, especially an uninvited guest, is considered representative of the Lord. And Manu himself has given some, in Manu Samhita, he's written about how the atiti should be respected and especially should be fed. And Prabhupada also talks about it, that even if the guest is an enemy, literally if the guest is your enemy, if he comes to your house, you have to treat them so nicely that they don't feel any enmity, they don't feel like your enemy. And there are certain things that is recommended in the Shastra, which Srila Prabhupada also repeated, that the guest, even if you don't have much to offer, you can offer some sweet words, place to sit, and some water. That anyone, even the poorest person, can offer to a guest. And it's also described that even if you do all your other worship properly, if you don't respect a guest, then everything becomes fruitless. So the word for guest is atithi, and atithi literally means someone who, there are two meanings. Tithi is the day, the lunar day, it's like Madhava Tithi, Bhakti Janani Tithi, like Chaturdashi or Trayodashi, it's a Tithi, the lunar day according to the signs of the moon, movements of the moon. So Atithi means someone who comes without any Tithi, without plan, just appears at your door. And that's one of the duties of the Grihastha, is to cater to those, not beggars, not actually beggars necessarily, but actually sadhus, whose job is to go to the Grihastha's houses to uplift them. So when Maharishi Parikshit met Shukadeva Goswami, he actually mentioned that you normally only stay long enough as it takes for the householder to milk a cow and offer the milk to you, and that's how you subsist yourself, sustain yourself. So Prabhupada comments on the Prabhupada, there are many sages who just drinking milk, that's all the sustenance they need. So they go to the Grihastha's house just to accept some milk, and in that brief time, they'll impart some Krishna consciousness, impart some spiritual instructions to the householders who are also seeking that. They're very happy if a sannyasi or a brahmana or Vaishnava comes to their door uninvited, and they'll try to respect them and honor them and offer them whatever they have. So Manu, of course, is very conversant in this etiquette, because he's the author of Manu Samhita. He's given the details how to receive a guest and how to worship a guest. So the other meaning of atithi is someone who stays not even for one full day. Atithi is a full day. Atithi, he stays maybe overnight only. Because the sannyasis are not interested in setting up a comfortable home, living in someone's house as an uninvited guest for a long time. So they come simply to impart some spiritual instructions, maybe accept a little bhoga, a little prasad, a little milk, and then move on to the next place and try to instruct more people like that by moving from place to place. So we see in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes how this unfolded with the Brahmana who came to Jagannath Mishra's house carrying his Gopal deity. We're all familiar with the story, but you may not know that this Gopal deity, the original Gopal of the Brahmana, he's actually in London now. There's a devotee named Raj Sundar. We were just there recently, had darshan of Gopal. That original Gopal that the Brahmana, traveling Brahmana had, he actually has worship of that deity now. So this Brahmana, he was a traveling sannyasi. He came to Jagannath Mishra's house in the evening time, which was the traditional time. And Jagannath Mishra welcomed him with very sweet words and said, please, we'll offer you our kitchen. Please cook for your Gopal. Because what would happen generally is when the Brahman was in the forest, he would just eat whatever is available, which is not much, some fruits, roots. I don't even know what roots they would eat, You'd have to be a botanist to really know what fruits in the jungle are edible. But they knew, they had the culture. So, only occasionally they would have the chance to actually cook a proper offering and honor that prasadam. So the Brahmin agreed, he said, sure, I'll cook. And he cooked an offering for Gopal. And as he was ringing the bell and chanting the mantras for Gopal to accept the offering, what happened? We know Nimai appeared and started eating right from the deity's plate. And the Brahmin was shocked, that how can this be happening? This child is eating the Lord's offering, and started crying. And Jagannath Mishra was furious. And it happened 3 times, actually. It started chasing, he wanted to beat Nimai, and everyone said, no, he's just a little boy, he doesn't know right and wrong, don't be so mad. And the Brahmin said, it's fine, Krishna doesn't want me to eat, just give me some fruit, I'll be happy with that. And said, no, if you don't cook, it'll be an offense on our part. So please, we'll take the child away, we'll lock him up, and please cook again. So he agreed, okay, fine, I'll cook again. And the second time, the same thing happened. And this time, Jagannath Mishra took a stick and started chasing Nimai. And they took him to the next house, a neighbor's house. They locked him inside. The ladies were sitting with Nimai in their laps, having fun with him. It was already late at night. And again, the Brahmin said, I don't want to cook. This is getting over endeavor. Twice it's happened. The Lord doesn't want me to eat, so don't, it's fine. And then Vishwarup came. And he was so charming and so beautiful. And he spoke so sweetly to the Brahmin, said, please, please cook once more. It's an offense on our part if you don't take prasadam because of my brother. And so he was so charmed by Vishwarup. Even though it was late at night, he agreed, okay. It wasn't for himself, really. It was more to pacify Jagannath Mishra and his hosts. And he was quite selfless in that regard. But the third time, even though Nimai was supposed to be asleep, he was supposed to be behind locked doors, he still appeared there. And everyone else fell asleep. He says that by the touch of Nidra Devi's sari, all the ladies, Jagannath Mishra, Sachi Devi, everybody fell asleep. And only Nimai was there alone with the Brahmana. So the third time, again, the Brahman was shocked, again, this boy is doing the same thing. And then Nimai told him, I don't understand why you're so upset. You're calling me, you're chanting the mantra for me to come and eat. And then when I come and to eat, you're getting mad. What is this? What kind of reception is this? And then he showed him his form as Gopal. And the Brahman was thunderstruck, that my Gopal deity is actually manifest here now in this Nimai, this small boy. And he told him that actually, you're my devotee, even in previous lives. You came, when I was living in Vrindavan as the son of Nanda Maharaj, you came to Nanda Maharaj's house, and the same pastime we enacted there, you cooked, and I came and accepted your food. So please don't tell anyone that I've appeared now as Krishna. Now, when Nimai was young, he hadn't manifested his, he was still pretending just to be a so-called ordinary child. And though everyone loved him, they didn't realize that he's actually the Supreme Lord. But he showed to this Brahmana that he was Krishna himself. And he told him, you don't tell anyone that here you had my darshan and you can continue. And so the Brahman obviously was overwhelmed in ecstasy. This is one of the very early manifestations of Nimai showing his divinity to the wandering Brahmana. So like that, we can see from all these examples how to properly receive Brahmana, Vaishnava guests, how to honor them, and the benefits that can accrue, and the offenses that can accrue if we do it in the wrong way. And just to end, there's one also very nice description in Mahabharata of when Krishna, he came to Hastinapur as the peace ambassador of the Pandavas. So this is just before the Battle of Kurukshetra was to take place. And the armies were already gathering on both sides, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. And there was a lot of shuttle diplomacy, it's a modern term, where the diplomats are going here and there trying to get the warring parties to stop fighting and make some kind of treaty. So this is going on in Hastinapur also. First, King Virat sent his Brahman to Hastinapur, then Dhritarashtra sent Sanjaya to the Pandavas. And then Krishna said, I'll go. I'll go as the final messenger. I'll try to create peace between the two parties, because otherwise there's going to be huge destruction and all the Kshatriyas will be killed. So Krishna personally came to Hastinapur as the messenger of the Pandavas. Such an intimate relationship he had with him. So as far as I know, Krishna had only come once previously to Hastinapur, which was after the Pandavas married Draupadi, and they had come out of hiding for 1 year. Then he accompanied them back to Hastinapur. And all the Pandavas, and along with Krishna, had visited Hastinapur, and of course the Pandavas stayed there. But this time it was Krishna alone. He was like you could say, star of the show. It was Krishna coming personally to Hastinapur. And it's described that the citizens were so excited. And we hear when Krishna entered Mathura what happened. So it was something like that it's actually said in Mahabharata that there was not a single person left at home. Every single person came out to see Krishna, and they were all standing on the balconies and rooftops, and there were so many people that there was a risk of collapse. The balconies were shaking under the weight of so many people. They were so eager to see Krishna. And there was a huge reception. Dhritarashtra actually had the idea that, if we please Krishna and give him a lot of gifts and, flatter him and pacify him, maybe he'll come on our side. And Duryodhana had an even more dastardly plan. What to speak of welcoming a guest, welcoming Krishna, the Lord himself. His plan was, I'll capture Krishna. I'll arrest Krishna, and then once he's under our control, in captivity, then the Pandavas will lose all their enthusiasm to fight, and we can just carry on happily. And one stroke, I'll finish the whole business by capturing Krishna. I wonder where he was all those years when Krishna was killing the demons, Putana, Jarasandha. Somehow he didn't get the message, He thought he could capture Krishna. So when Krishna arrived, all the Kuru elders, they received him on the street and they ushered him into the hall. And Krishna greeted everybody. Dhritarashtra gave him a asana, a throne as good as his own. And Krishna said, well, today's just arrived. He said, tomorrow we'll have the official meeting. And then what Krishna did, he went straight to Vidura's house. And he met Vidura, who was a great devotee of his. And Kunti was living with Vidura. And Kunti was in great distress. For so many years, her sons had been exiled after being treated so harshly by the Kauravas. She met Krishna after so many years, and she's Krishna's aunt. And she was crying and holding Krishna's neck and pouring out her heart, all of her grief to Krishna. And Krishna is pacifying her. Don't worry. Soon you'll see your sons will be on the throne. All the wrongs that they suffered, all the injustices, they'll get revenge, and the Kauravas will be destroyed. Don't worry. And it's not actually mentioned in Mahabharata, but Srila Prabhupada several times has mentioned this pastime of when Krishna came to Vidura's house and Vidura fed him bananas. Right? You must have all heard this story. And it says that Vidura was so overwhelmed. There are different versions. Sometimes it says Vidura's wife, sometimes Vidura himself. But Prabhupada several times mentions it, that he was so overwhelmed with ecstasy that he fed Krishna bananas, but he peeled the banana. And instead of feeding the banana fruit to Krishna, he was feeding the peel to Krishna and discarding the fruit because he was just overwhelmed. And Krishna was accepting the banana peel from Vidura. And because it was offered with so much love, he wasn't concerned about the item itself, but he accepted the banana peels. I'm not sure if you've ever tried to eat banana peel. Probably you have some idea. It's not something the tongue is going to enjoy. But Krishna accepted it because it was offered with so much love. Then Krishna went to see Duryodhana. And Duryodhana said, oh, Krishna, it's so nice you've come. We've prepared Dushasana's palace for you. It's even better than my own palace. And we've made this big feast. Please come enjoy with us, eat with us. And Krishna made some excuses. He said, actually, a messenger, he shouldn't partake of the hospitality unless his mission is accomplished. And Duryodhana said, come on, you're always on the Pandava's side. You're here with us now. At least eat something with us. And Krishna says, no, actually, I'm not going to, because one should eat only if there's love between the two parties or if there's a great desperate need. And I'm not in any need. He didn't say this, but maybe he said, I just had banana peels. They were so tasty. But I have no need to eat your food, and there's no love between us. You have insulted my devotees. I'm not going to accept either your hospitality of staying in Dushasana's palace or your food. And Duryodhana was offended. He gets offended very easily. But Krishna didn't accept the invitation. So you can see that Krishna, this is before he spoke Bhagavad Gita, but the principle is there, bhaktyaham upāyātaṁ asnāmi prayatatmana. If someone offers with love, he'll accept even a banana peel, whereas Duryodhana had presented, he was the king, he had a huge feast prepared for Krishna and accommodation. Krishna wasn't interested. He stayed in Vidura's much more simple accommodation, and he ate his banana peel or whatever he ate. It was much simpler than what Duryodhana was offering. So Mahabharata, it just gives like one line that night Vidura and Krishna stayed up all night talking. I'm so curious, what did they talk about? It must have been such nectar to be part of that conversation, but it doesn't give any details of what they talked about. And just in the early morning, before sunrise, they rested for a little bit, and then Krishna woke up, did his morning duties, charity to the brahmanas, like we read in Krishna book, his daily morning duties. Duryodhana and Shakuni came to invite him to the court. Krishna said, I'm not quite ready, please wait. And then eventually they all went to the court. And many great rishis had come. Parashuram came, Narad Muni came, Kanva Muni, and they all were seated very nicely in the assembly hall, and then Krishna started speaking that the Pandavas have been so mistreated, now is your chance to make amends and give them back their half of the kingdom. And then Parashuram spoke, Kanva Muni spoke, Narad Muni spoke, Bhishma, Drona. Everyone was trying to convince Duryodhana that if you persist in your enmity to the Pandavas, it's going to be a battle, and everyone is going to be killed just for your mistakes, for your greed, to satisfy your desires. And Duryodhana is sitting there listening to this. He's sitting with Karna on one seat, and he's kind of scratching his head and being very distracted. He's like a real brat, He actually stormed out a few times. When he didn't like what people were saying, he just got up and left so rudely. and his father is there, Dhritarashtra is there. Dhritarashtra said, I'm convinced, but you have to convince Duryodhana. Krishna, please convince Duryodhana. And Duryodhana was just storming out in indignance. And he even told Krishna that, you're always on the side of the Pandavas, but I've examined myself. I've been very introspective, and I can't see any fault that I've ever committed. This is the kind of ahankara he had. Literally told Krishna, I don't see any fault in my actions. So why are you always against me? And he wouldn't listen to any of these great sages, Dhritarashtra, nobody. Even Gandhari, Dhritarashtra called his mother Gandhari. She also tried to preach to him. He wasn't interested. And he was still thinking, I'm going to capture Krishna, and all this charade will be over. I'm going to come out on top, I'll capture Krishna, the Pandavas will be finished, and end of story. And so he was preparing his soldiers. He had a whole plan. They'll come from different sides and attack Krishna. Satyaki was Krishna's companion, and he understood what was going on, and he warned Krishna. Krishna said, don't worry. So as they were going to attack Krishna and arrest him, then what did he do? He manifested his Virat Rupa. The same Virat Rupa that he manifested to Arjuna in the 11th chapter. And immediately, everyone was stunned, and he even manifested the Pandavas within that Virat Rupa, just to show the Kauravas that I'm on their side, you have no chance. And he actually gave divine vision to Dhritarashtra to have darshan of that Virat Rupa. Dhritarashtra, we know, is blind, but just for that few moments, he was given vision so he could see Krishna's darshan, the universal form. And just to prove to everyone there that if Krishna is on the side of the Pandavas, there's no chance for the Kauravas. Jayastu pandu putranam yesham paksya janadana. Because Krishna is on the side of the Pandavas, therefore they will always be victorious. And then Krishna left. And Duryodhana was just stunned, like no question of arresting this personality who's showing the entire universe from his body. And Krishna went back to say goodbye to Vidura and Kunti, and he went. And as we know, after that, the two armies met, and Bhagavad Gita was spoken, and the battle of Kurukshetra continued. Final point I wanted to make. So we talked about the Atiti Seva and how the mother, the father, the acharya, and the guests were all to be treated like God. So that also reminds us of a verse which Prabhu quoted yesterday from the 5th canto. Just when you want to recall it, it slips my mind. Guru na sasyat, svajano na sasyat, pita na sasyat, janani na sasyat, daivam na sasyat, na pratishtha sasyat, namo chayadya samupeta mrityum. So this also gives a list of personalities like the mother, the father, the guru, that one shouldn't take these posts unless one is able to deliver one's dependence. So it's this verse could be really unpacked and spoken about in length. What are the duties of the mother, the duties of the father before having a child, the duty of a guru before accepting a disciple. So many years back, I think in the early 90s, there was one devotee who was really campaigning, making a whole campaign that because there are issues with gurus and disciples, and some gurus are falling down, which creates a great disturbance in ISKCON, we should have a moratorium on initiation until it's worked out. So no one should initiate anybody till we can figure out, what is the position of guru in ISKCON, how is it that they could fall down? Does it mean they're not qualified? So many questions are there, and it could still be there. So he was proposing this and actually making quite a strong campaign to the GBC also that we should stop initiations until it's sorted out, because it creates a lot of damage if someone's spiritual master has spiritual difficulties. So this was the atmosphere at the time. And Hridayananda Maharaj was staying in the Conch building here, and I was serving my spiritual master in the next room, so I was kind of hearing the conversations. And so there was a discussion about this principle, and then another devotee brought up the point that why only initiation should be stopped? Why only focusing on the guru? The verse says, Guru na sasyat, but also Pitana sasyat, Janani. Janani means mother. One shouldn't become a mother or father. They're given the same honor, the same responsibility. Maybe the mother, father has responsibility for 1 or 2, 3 children, and the guru has responsibility for many disciples. But this responsibility, the gravity of the responsibility is the same. So it's not that our children are all becoming great Vaishnavas. So if you want to stop initiations, you should also stop the grihasthas having children. Because it's the same principle, the same responsibility. So it was a very interesting, rich discussion, and it's true. It's according to Shastra. We shouldn't take disciples. We shouldn't become parents unless we have strong confidence that we can guide them properly. So the guest, the guru, the disciple, the mother, the father, they're all given equal respect, and they also have great responsibility. Okay, sorry, maybe gone a little bit over, but we can end here unless there are some comments or questions. Manivanda Prabhu.
Thanks for your class. I've always wondered with Krishna, he says by his glance all the warriors are killed by my will, and he wanted Yudhisthira to be re-established on the throne, etc. So it was by his will the battle was happening, all the warriors killed, but at the same time he played the role as a peacemaker. It sort of seems like contradictory, so how do I understand that?
Yeah, it's true. And Krishna was actually blamed for not creating peace, though he did. He gives free will to the living entity. So he did his best. He went there. He gave all the good instructions, which were not accepted by Duryodhana. And of course, Krishna had his plan. He knew that the Kshatriyas have to be destroyed. There are too many. And there has to be a Vaishnava king like Maharaj Yudhishthira enthroned. But it wasn't like he was half-hearted in what he did. He went there with, he knew that it wouldn't work, but he still had to make the attempt, But he didn't use his Shakti to, make Duryodhana a devotee. That's not Krishna's mood. It has to be voluntary. For Duryodhana to become a Vaishnava would have been an amazing thing. It would change the whole course of Mahabharata and history. But he's incorrigible, he couldn't do it, even though Krishna himself was coming and offering that opportunity. Instead of worshipping Krishna, he wanted to capture Krishna. So he had to take the result of his offenses. You can't offend Vaishnavas to the extent at all, but to the extent that Duryodhana offended the Pandavas for so many decades, he had to get that reaction fall upon his head, But Krishna did go with all sincerity, and if Duryodhana had accepted, then who knows, things would have been different. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for the wonderful class, Prabhu. I was wondering about the treatment of the guests as representative of God that you said. And what would be your advice for some of us living in the West? And you were saying about beware of dogs and stuff like that. Many times, like I live in South America, and it's very common for a relative or a friend just to pop up, or a neighbor, uninvited, but they just, their purpose is different than the purpose of the visit of a sadhu or a Vaishnava coming, and it's just prajalpa, or maybe, I don't know, it's just like they hang out there. What would be your advice for us in that situation?
Well, if they're coming to a Vaishnava's home, that's automatically of great benefit. I guess they'll see your deities, and if you offer them anything, it'll be prasadam. So generally, as you were saying, like in the Vedic times, the guest would be the superior person, one coming to give Krishna. But if the guest is not a Vaishnava and you're the Vaishnava, then you use that interaction, that chance for interacting to give them some, some little glimpse of Krishna, some little taste of Krishna. In fact, Srila Prabhupada, he was very insistent when it comes to hospitality that anyone who would come to the temple should get prasadam. And he would actually have his servant sitting by the door. If Prabhupada was giving a darshan or something, he would have his servant. I actually spoke to Harishari Prabhu yesterday to confirm this. He would sit by the door with some sweets or something. And anyone who came to the darshan or the temple, they should get at least something. And we know even from the early days in 26 Second Avenue when Prabhupada had nothing, he would cut up one apple in so many small pieces and give them at least, token Mahaprasad, because prasadam has so much potency. So you can use that as a preaching opportunity, as much as you can depending on the relationship, to give them some prasadam, some talk about the Lord, and that way benefit the guests. Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Thank you all very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, all Premanandi.